All right, today we're diving into a really complex and often misunderstood condition that turns the body's own defense system against itself. We're talking about systemic lupus erythematosus, or as most people know it, SLE, or simply lupus.
So let's just imagine for a second. Think of your body as this incredible, well-defended fortress. And your immune system, that's your elite army, always on guard. But what happens if that army gets confused? What if your own defenders suddenly can't tell the difference between a real invader and the very walls of the fortress they're supposed to protect? Well, that's the fundamental idea behind autoimmunity, and it's the reality for people living with lupus every single day.
So, to put it plainly, what exactly is lupus? Well, it's a chronic autoimmune disease, which means it's long-term, and basically the immune system goes haywire. Instead of just fighting off viruses and bacteria, it starts producing these things called autoantibodies, and these are like weapons that mistakenly target your own healthy tissues and cells. This friendly fire is what kicks off widespread inflammation and can cause damage just about anywhere in the body.
To really wrap our heads around lupus, we've got to take a closer look at this invisible war happening inside the body. This unseen battle where the body basically becomes its own enemy.
Let's go back to that security force analogy. Imagine the guards completely lose their recognition software. They start seeing perfectly healthy, normal cells as dangerous intruders and launch an all-out assault. It's this relentless, misguided attack that fuels the inflammation and all the symptoms that come with lupus.
Now this is a number that really stops you in your tracks. For every one man who gets a lupus diagnosis, there are 9 women. That's right, a 9-to-1 ratio. It's one of the most striking things about this disease, and you can bet researchers are working hard to figure out exactly why this huge gender gap exists.
And it's not just about gender, it's also about timing. Take a look at this. A huge 65% of people are diagnosed between the ages of 16 and 55. We're talking about the prime of life here, when people are building careers, starting families, living their most active years. It's just a devastating time for a disease like this to strike. So this all leads to one of the biggest challenges when it comes to lupus. It's famously known as the great imitator. Why? Because its symptoms are all over the map and can look like a dozen other illnesses. That makes it absolutely critical to learn how to read the body's many signals.
I mean, just look at the most common symptoms. The numbers here are incredible. A whopping 95% of patients deal with this profound, overwhelming fatigue and major joint and muscle pain. These are almost always the first signs. And right behind that, you have skin rashes affecting about 80% of people. You know, on their own, any one of these might not raise a red flag, but when you see them happening together, that's when doctors start to think, maybe this is lupus.
Often, the most visible clues are right there on the skin. The classic one, the one you might have heard of, is the mallow rash, or butterfly rash, that spreads across the cheeks and the bridge of the nose. But doctors also look for other things, like these raised, scaly patches called discoid rashes, or an extreme reaction to sunlight. Even unexplained hair loss, called alopecia, can be a major clue.
But, a lot of the most important signals are completely invisible, hidden away in the bloodstream. This internal immune attack can cause anemia, which is a shortage of your oxygen-carrying red blood cells. It can cause leukopenia, a drop in your disease-fighting white blood cells, and it can cause thrombocytopenia, which means you have low levels of the platelets you need for your blood to clot properly.
And this is where that word systemic in the name really matters. Lupus isn't contained to one spot. It can go after the kidneys, causing protein to leak into the urine. It can inflame the delicate lining around the heart and lungs, causing sharp, painful breathing. It can even impact the brain, leading to anything from brain fog and memory issues to severe headaches or even seizures.
So with all these different symptoms popping up all over the body, you can probably imagine that diagnosing lupus isn't straightforward. It's more like trying to solve an incredibly complex puzzle. So let's see how doctors manage to piece it all together.
Right. So how on earth do you do it? How do doctors actually pin down a diagnosis for a disease that can look so different from one person to the next? Well, it's not guesswork. They follow a very careful, methodical pathway to get to the answer.
So the whole journey usually starts when a doctor notices a certain pattern of symptoms. From there, the first big step is an initial blood screening for something called anti-nuclear antibodies, or ANA. If that comes back positive, they'll then run more specific antibody tests looking for markers that are really characteristic of lupus. And finally, they take all that evidence and score it against a formal set of criteria to officially confirm the diagnosis.
Now, that ANA test is a huge first step. It's incredibly sensitive. Something like 98% of people with lupus will test positive. But, and this is a really big but, a positive result doesn't automatically mean you have lupus. Other health conditions can cause a positive ANA, and some perfectly healthy people have it too. That's why it's just one piece of the puzzle, a really important clue, but not the whole story.
And this is how that puzzle finally gets solved. Doctors use this really sophisticated point system. Here's a simplified look at the concept. They assign points for different clinical findings, like that butterfly rash or joint pain, and for specific results from the blood tests. If all the points add up to 10 or more, then a diagnosis of lupus is officially confirmed. It's a very thorough process.
Okay, so once that diagnosis is in place, the entire focus shifts. It's no longer about finding the problem, it's about managing it. The #1 goal becomes calming down that overactive immune system and getting the inflammation under control.
And this is something we have to be really clear about. At this time, there is no cure for lupus. Instead, every treatment strategy is aimed at 3 critical goals. First, controlling flare-ups, which are those sudden periods where symptoms get much worse. Second, managing the day-to-day symptoms. And third, and maybe most importantly, preventing any permanent damage to vital organs.
Now, treatment is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all deal. It has to be tailored to how severe the disease is for that specific person. So for less severe cases, maybe it's just skin and joints, the goal is symptom management with things like anti-inflammatory drugs. But when major organs like the kidneys or brain are at risk, the whole strategy changes. Then it's about hitting the disease hard with powerful drugs like high-dose steroids and immunosuppressants to really dial back the immune system's attack.
But it's not all about medication. Lifestyle management is just as essential to the treatment plan. This means things like avoiding direct sun exposure, which is a known trigger for flares. It means being proactive about heart health. It means protecting your bones, especially if you're on long-term steroids. And it absolutely means staying in constant contact with your team of specialists.
And all of that brings us to the reality of what it's truly like to live with this disease. It's not a one-time event. It's a lifelong journey. You see, the disease typically ebbs and flows. There are periods of remission, where things are quiet and symptoms are low, but then there are these completely unpredictable flare-ups, where things can suddenly get much worse. So navigating this path successfully takes an incredible amount of resilience, and it requires this really strong, open partnership with your healthcare team so you can adjust the plan whenever the disease decides to change course.
So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. For people living with lupus, the goal isn't finding a cure right now, it's achieving control. It's a chronic illness, and it's managed with constant vigilance, with an amazing amount of resilience, and with the unwavering support of a dedicated team.